We are not lost, we are scattered.
What if I told you Jews are not all of the Israel of the Bible?
From Shem came Jacob, which is the father of the 12 tribes of Israel.
Who are the 12 tribes of Israel today?
You guys are the true Hebrewites, are for real.
Israel stepping into its prophetic destiny as a light to the nations.
Israel is God's chosen people, always have been God's chosen people, always will be God's chosen people.
This is part of Israel's calling to be a light to the world.
By the time that was all happening, you were already deep in Africa, lost.
Yeah.
Especially the Igbo area, like they are the part of the lost tribe of Israel.
Wow.
You were then shipped to North America, South America, and the Caribbean to work.
It's playing out exactly as it's prophesied in the Bible.
We are the original African Hebrew. We are scattered all over.
With skillful manipulating of the press, they're able to make the victim look like the criminal, and the criminal look like the victim.
African American community seem to be going through an identity crisis. That's just my own personal view. So what I've watched is African Americans say that they're African American, then I've heard them say that they're American, they're not African. I heard them say that they're black, and then came in, they said they're not black, they're Moors. Then they said they're not Moors. Then they said they are Aboriginal. Then they said they're not Aboriginal, that they are ADOS. And then they went from ADOS, which is American descendants of slaves, to FBA, which is Foundational Black Americans. I've watched African Americans say that they're Hebrews, the original Hebrews. I've watched them say that they're original Muslims, and I'm just wondering when we're going to get to a time for quote-unquote African Americans to understand who they are.
Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white, it's always something pure. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity.
Beyond the rivers of Ethiopia and western Havilah, where there is gold, the worshippers, the descendants of God's dispersed ones, dwell down the Osiris River, along the Gold Coast, in the former Kingdom of Ghana, once known as Negro Land, West Africa. If we take a look at Midrash, Bereshit Rabbah 73, Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Simon said, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were not exiled to the place that the 10 tribes were exiled. The 10 tribes were exiled beyond the Sebastian River. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin are scattered in all the lands. The 10 tribes are on the other side of the river Sebastian, and the Jews at present scattered over the earth are those of Judah and Benjamin. Rabbi Elijah ben Solomon, better known as Vilna Gaon, lived in the 18th century and was a scholar specializing in Talmudic studies and the foremost leader of Gnostic Jewry. Vilna is a title bestowed upon the head of the Babylonian Jewish Academy and subsequently used to refer to a distinguished pious person. The word Gaon means genius. Vilna Gaon's students crafted a letter to the 10 lost tribes of Israel. The letter, sent from the Ashkenazi rabbis and Eretz Israel to the sons of Moshe Rabbeinu and the 10 tribes. In 1830, Rabbi Baruch was sent as an emissary to find the 10 lost tribes. Here's a truncated form of the letter addressed. A letter sent by the elders and rabbis of the Ashkenazi community in the land of Israel to the B'nai Moshe, children of Moses, and the 10 tribes, written and presented by the great sage, knowledgeable in the hidden and revealed, the great light, our teacher. The letter reads, with the help of Hashem, Rosh Hodesh, Marhizvan, 5591, years to the creation of the world, and the land of Israel, the holy cities, Jerusalem, Hebron, and the holy city of the upper Galilee, Saphat. Thus send the dwellers of the land of Israel, who abide by the Torah of Moses, which is a gift and inherited portion to our brothers, the children of Israel, the son of Isaac, the son of Abraham, who revealed the belief in Hashem. They are our holy and pure brothers, the righteous upon whom the word rests, the B'nai Moshe, servant of Hashem, who dwell across the river Shavatim, also known as Sebastian, and who pledge allegiance to the King of Israel, who sits upon a mighty throne and who rules over the 10 tribes, whose settlement is in the land of beyond the rivers of Nubia Cush, who camp around to their banners the tribe of Dan, of Naphtali, of Gad, and Asher, the tribe of Issachar, who understand the movements of the celestial bodies, constantly involved in Torah study, and the tribe of Zebulun, encamped at Mount Freon, and across them the tribe of Reuben, of Ephraim, of Manasseh, and the tribe of Shimon. May Hashem be with them and their king, and to our honored brothers, the children of Israel, the upright and righteous sons of Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, upon whom the prophet Jeremiah prophesied. Therefore said Hashem Zaraoth, God of Israel, no male offspring of Jehonadab ben Rechab will ever be cut off from standing before me for eternity. Accept abundant greetings from your brethren, the children of Israel, the last remnant of the tribes of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, dispersed among the four corners of the earth. Another portion of the letter penned by the scholars of Vilna Gaon reads, as our rabbis have told us, that in the year 4640, a man, one righteous and upright, from the tribe of Dan, Eldad Hadani, testified of their greatness and grandeur, righteousness and holiness, saying that Hashem has helped them remain secure in their settlement, safe from the surrounding nations, and that the ways of the Holy Torah, clear to them as transmitted by Moses, our teacher at Sinai, and that they adjudicate capital and civil cases in their council, and have reaped the rewards of longevity, prosperity, and honor, as Solomon said. Now we've heard a lot about the Sebastian River. Let's delve a little deeper into that. The Jewish Encyclopedia of 1906 says Sebastian, in rabbinical literature, the river across which the 10 tribes were transported by Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and about which so many legends subsequently accumulated that it was considered by some scholars to be altogether mythical. The name of the river occurs in a Targum of Pseudo-Jonathan in Exodus 34:10. I will remove them from there and place them beyond the river Sebastian. Rabbi Judah B. Simon said, the tribes of Judah and Benjamin were not exiled to the same place as the 10 tribes. The Arabs, who also know the legend of the Banu Musa, sons of Moses, agree with the Jews in placing their land in Africa. The Babylonian Talmud, Eldad the Danite, the teachings of Vilna Gaon, and the Jewish Encyclopedia of 1906 are all reconciled on one accord that the bulk of the 10 tribes are on the other side of the Sebastian River in the land of beyond west of Nubia Kush, while Judah and Benjamin were scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. By 605 BC, another Chaldean, the eldest son of Nabopolassar, the first king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, ascended the throne of Babylon, named Nebuchadnezzar. In 597 BC, Babylonian Emperor Nebuchadnezzar would lead a siege on Jerusalem, which led to the destruction of Solomon's temple in 586 BC. Built by King Solomon, the temple had stood since 1000 BC, but 344 years after his death, the temple was destroyed. This was explained by the Judahites upon their return. Ezra 5:11 and 12. And thus they returned us answer, saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was builded these many years ago, which a great king of Israel builded and set up. But after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath. He gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem in the kingdom of Judah, carrying them off into the Babylonian captivity. Daniel 1:1 and 2. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. During the siege, a portion of the high priests were able to escape, fleeing and settled in a place called Sana, where they lived as traders and craftsmen. Sana is said to have been founded at the base of the mountains of Jabal Nukum by Shem, the son of Noah, which is in modern-day Yemen. The name Sana is attested to in old Sabian inscriptions, mostly from the 3rd century AD.
Have a look at the satellite photograph of Africa. We've got Jews in Africa from the ancient period. Ahead of the biblical period, we have Jews in Elephantine. We'll spend a little bit of time looking at that location. We've got Jews in Alexandria, Egypt, a very important site and location of Jews in antiquity. Qairan, Carthage, Jews in Ethiopia. By the way, I'm putting these up kind of like in chronological order of when we believe these communities were first established. Lots of Jews in Algeria and in Morocco. And we have several West African regions that support Jewish populations. Much of the background historical information in these is largely lost and very difficult to filter out, but the entire continent is represented. And of course, if you go to sub-Saharan Africa, I forgot to mention Fustat, which is of course the home of Maimonides, just outside Cairo, major Jewish center. But if you move to sub-Saharan Africa, you have of course South Africa, which has lots of Jews.
Whether it was a burst dam or the rise of Islam, something made the Jews abandon Senna. When they did, the only way open to them would have been to head for the coast, and for some at least, that meant catching the monsoon winds south to Africa.
To the casual observer, they look and live much like any other traditional Southern African community. But if you scratch below the surface, there are some intriguing differences.
Here I am in South Africa, and there are these men wearing skull caps and talit, shoulder wraps. You would see this in any synagogue in America or Israel, but I never thought I'd see it here in South Africa.
I want to find out how these people seem to have Jewish customs. Samuel Moetti is president of the Lemba Cultural Association.
Pleasure. So, I'll be honest, I came into this village and the first word I heard was shalom,
Yes.
a Hebrew word.
Yes.
How is that possible? How is it that the Lemba are speaking Hebrew?
The Lembas are the original Hebrews, and they were scattered, as you know, and they crossed into Africa. So they were scattered all over. So in South Africa, in many parts of South Africa, you find the Lembas who are actually Hebrews.
Hebrew. So the Lembas claim to be descendants of ancient Israelites?
Not claim, they are.
They are?
They are.
Okay.
We are the original African Hebrew. We are scattered all over.
Dr. Magdal LaRue, professor of Old Testament and Biblical Archaeology, documents the presence of the Lemba tribe in South Africa in her book, The Lemba, a Lost Tribe of Israel in Southern Africa. Dr. LaRue writes, a group in Southern Africa who even today regard themselves as Jews or Israelites are the Lemba. To my knowledge, the only group in Southern Africa who have specified oral traditions that they originally came by boat to Africa. LaRue says, the theory regarding the 10 lost tribes of Israel links to the history of when the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom were carried off into exile by the Assyrians in 722 BC, never to return. Those tribes, of course, were not known as Jews, but as Israelites.
men from other tribes were not allowed to marry into the Lemba. They refused to eat pigs and certain other creatures. They practiced the ritual slaughter of animals with a special knife. And they circumcised their male children at an early age. Many of today's Lemba are Christian, but blend elements of Judaism even into their services.
I'll lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help.
DNA has corroborated this claim and has proven that these sub-Saharan Africans indeed have Shemitic origins.
But final proof only came when the science of genetics was applied to Lemba oral history, and geneticist Trevor Jenkins decided to examine the Y chromosome of Lemba males. His interest had been sparked by what he'd heard about Lemba culture.
The musicologist Margaret Nabarro told me the Lemba were of Jewish origin.
I think she said that their music showed some signs of Jewish influence.
Yes, she did. And so I went with her to a Lemba cultural festival and collected my samples there.
Astonishingly, Jenkins discovered that the Lemba were indeed of Semitic origin. Subsequent research done by other geneticists showed that a significant proportion of Lemba men had a Y chromosome pattern known as the Cohen modal haplotype, which is characteristic of the Kohanim, the ancient Jewish priestly class. They were effectively a lost Israelite tribe.
A 1999 article in the New York Times titled, "DNA Backs a Tribe's Tradition of Early Descent from the Jews" by Nicholas Wade reads, "The Lemba, a Bantu-speaking people of southern Africa, have a tradition that they were led out of Judea by a man named Buba. They practice circumcision, keep one day a week holy, and avoid eating pork or pig-like animals, such as hippopotamus."
Can you give me a few examples of some of the Jewish
Yes, we don't partake of pork.
Okay.
We don't mix milk with meat.
It sounds to me like the Lemba have a unique culture surrounded by others who do not practice the same way.
That is correct.
Wade goes on to write, "A team of geneticists has found that many Lemba men carry in their male chromosome a set of DNA sequences that is distinctive of the Kohanim, the Jewish priests believed to be the descendants of Aaron. The genetic signature of priests, a hereditary caste different from rabbis but with certain ritual roles, is particularly common among Lemba men who belong to the senior of their 12 groups known as the Buba clan."
Here is proof that one cannot tamper with. These people are who they say they are.
What was even more surprising about the DNA research was that the Cohen genetic fingerprint was especially strong in one particular Lemba clan, as geneticist Himmler Sujal explained.
The Lemba identify different clans, and one group that had it at a frequency in excess of 50% was the Buba.
According to Lemba oral tradition, the Buba clan formed the priestly class and were responsible for leading the Lemba out of Israel.
Of course, Aaron is the brother of Moses, making the Lemba in sub-Saharan South Africa direct descendants of the Levitical priesthood. The word Lemba may originate in Kalemba, a Swahili word for turbans worn by some Bantu peoples, or Lembi, a Bantu word meaning non-African or respected foreigner.
We adore and worship Yahweh, the only one. We don't adore ancestral spirits. We don't worship idols of animals, trees, stones, the sun, the stars, or the moon, which Yahweh has made. Culture is the backbone. It's a unifying force. Now, I know culture changes in accordance with time and place, but the root of culture remains the same. You see, now we have lost touch with our people for about 2,600 years now.
So the genetic testing actually proved to the doubters what you and your forefathers have been saying for generations. That must be exciting news. I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of the land. I knew very little about the people. But having spent time making the journey from Jerusalem down through Zimbabwe, having spent time here at this festival, seeing what your people are all about, I can only sum it up in one word, and it's shalom.
Shalom.
In his book, Finding Gad, The Quest for the Lost Tribe of Gad, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shamir, who documented the God's pre-Exodus migration from Egypt to Nigeria, now tells us of another excursion from the Babylonian exile. There is evidence to suggest that there was a second wave of Hebrew and Gadites to Nigeria after the destruction of the first temple to join the first Gadites of Eri, Arodi, and Aroli that were already there. From Nigeria, the Gadites and the other Israelite tribes spread out to Ghana, Togo, Benin, Cameroon, and the Ivory Coast, and it was called Negro Land.
So what is the story of the Anglos as far as migration is concerned?
The Hebrews were part of the Hebrews, and so they stayed in Egypt together and then moved to Palestine. They were there when Nebuchadnezzar conquered the Hebrews and brought them to Babylon. But during the attack on Palestine, some of them escaped, and the Hebrews were those who escaped. When they escaped, they went back to Egypt, and from Egypt, they moved to Sudan, and they stayed in Khartoum. The word Khartoum is Khartoum.
Okay.
You know, the Sahara Desert has the egg.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a rocky part, there is a stony part, there is a sandy part.
Yeah.
And Khartoum means sandstorm. Kar is sand, storm is a home.
Okay.
Yeah, so because there is a sandstorm, they said the sun is just forming a storm. Khartoum. That is inside the sandstorm. They were there, but because of the harassment by the Arabs, they moved eastwards to Abyssinia, now called Ethiopia.
Oh, okay.
Now when they were in Ethiopia, people from India came and attacked them, seized some of them, and sent them to India. So if you go to India today, there are people who are just as black as you and me.
Oh.
Yeah. Because they could not withstand the incessant attack, they moved now westwards to the Niger Bend. So they were there where the old Ghana Empire was established.
Okay.
And the word Ghana is an heavy word. It's a hyena.
Ghana.
Ghana. We call it Ghana.
Ghana.
Yes, there is a drum you call Ghanavu. Now that one, don't beat it, you just strike it with the talking stick. It sounds like the hyena.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, the emblem is also that of the hyena, of the ancient Ghana Empire. Now, ancient Ghana Empire was overthrown by the Mali Empire. You know, normally when a big tree dies, a small tree grows. The other successors were not as powerful.
Okay.
So the Songhai Empire came and conquered them our people could not withstand the Songhai Empire, so they moved now east-west to Ile-Ife in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Okay. They were there also when the Oyo Empire started. The Oyo Empire and the Ashanti Empire, they all emerged at the same time.
Okay.
So they moved again westwards to Tado in Benin.
They left Nigeria.
Ile-Ife. And then when they came to Tado in Benin, the Oyo Empire was chasing them. So they moved again to Noche in Togo.
Oh, okay.
Eze-Ora of Agleri that has maintained a dynasty. He is the 34th king in Obugad. But apart from that they have maintained this kingship and dynasty, other Israelites are equally in Igbo land. We have Zebulun, we have Ephraim, we have Menashe, we have Reuben, we have Danites. They are all here.
N'ibi bosi wa apụta bụ si n'aka eri Gad bụ ụmụ Israel ma ọ bụ Israel si n'ọnwa o ma ọ bụ anyị ma ọ bụ isi Israel na anyị na ụmụ Israel bụ nwanne n'Igbo adọrọ n'elu n'Yoruba ma ebe a si wa apụta Hausa ma ebe a si wa apụta na anyị na bụ n'ọnwa n'Igbo adọrọ n'elu ị na-aga ị na-eme ngala n'ọnwa Chineke ka ị bụ.
You walk with pride because you are a child of Adonai.
Ka Chineke gozie unu abalị ya o.
Now Adonai bless us.
Shalom.
It's my shalom.
Igbos are Israelites. The question of Igbo being Israelites are not in doubt. There are evidences that Igbos are Israelites. The journey of Igbo started when the Assyrians actually attacked and exiled the 10 tribes of Israel, the Northern Kingdom, in 722 BCE. From that period, all the 10 tribes were scattered. The bulk, according to Mazutra, were taken to Africa. So in Igbo land, you will see most of these lost 10 tribes.
True to the prophecy of Jeremiah 49, Babylon had conquered Elam in 596 BC. So in addition to the 3 waves of exiled citizens of the kingdom of Judah taken to Babylon and the surrounding areas, they were all forced to remain there until the Persians took Babylon in October 539 BC. Under King Cyrus the Great, the various subjugated nations were emancipated and allowed to return to their homelands. In liberating the Jews from captivity, Cyrus the Great made a decree for the Jews to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple. Ezra 5:13-15. But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God, and the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem and brought them into the temple of Babylon. Those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor, and said unto him, Take these vessels, go, carry them into the temple that is in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be builded in his place. Daniel 9:2. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Jeremiah 29:10. For thus saith Yahweh, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you, in causing you to return to this place. The return of the exiles to Judah and the rebuilding of Jerusalem were also carried out in 3 waves. The first return was around 538 BC under the leadership of Zerubbabel. About 70 years later, a second group under the priestly leadership of Ezra returned to the land. Spiritual and religious reformation occurred at this time. 1 Esdras 9:40-41. So Esdras the chief priest brought the law unto the whole multitude, from man to women, and to all the priests, to hear the law in the first day of the 7th month. And he read in the broad court before the holy porch from morning unto midday, before both men and women, and the multitude gave heed unto the law. Nehemiah 8:8-9. So they read in the book of the law of God distinctly, and gave the sense, and caused them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, which is the Teshatha, the high civil dignitary, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites that taught the people, said unto all the people, This day is holy unto the Lord your God. Mourn not nor weep, for all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. Ezra the scribe, who, according to the book of Ezra, reestablished and reformed the religion of the Jews in the 5th century BC, began the search in the law, to teach in Israel statutes and ordinances. His work was continued by the scribes who preserved, taught, and interpreted the Bible. They linked the oral tradition to scripture, transmitting it as a running commentary on the Bible. For almost 300 years, they applied the Torah to changing circumstances, making it a living law. They also introduced numerous laws that were designated words of the scribes by Talmudic sources. This is the foundation of the Babylonian Talmud. The third wave of exiles returned under the leadership of Nehemiah, but a great deal of exiles did not return to Jerusalem, instead traveling westward and southeastern. Antiquities of the Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6. Shem, the third son of Noah, had 5 sons who inhabited the land that began at Euphrates and reached to the Indian Ocean. For Elam left behind him the Elamites, the ancestors of the Persians. Asher lived at the city Nineveh and named his subjects Assyrians, who became the most fortunate nation beyond others. Aphoxide named the Aphoxites, who are now called Chaldeans. Prior to the rise of Nebuchadnezzar, Ashurbanipal was the king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 669 BC to his death in 631. His extensive destruction of Elam is regarded by some scholars as a genocide. Elam was a Semitic, pre-Iranian civilization that was defeated by a conglomeration of other Elamites and Japhethites from Madai. This conglomeration was known as the Medes and the Persians. The rise of the Achaemenids in the 6th century BC brought an end to the existence of Elam as an independent political power. The Elamites and Medes became a part of the Persian Empire. According to Muslim historian and scholar Al-Tabari, page 206, the kings of Persia descended from Jamir, a son of Japheth. The Medo-Persian Empire ascended to power and conquered Babylon in 539 BC under Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenids Persian Empire, fulfilling the prophecy of Isaiah 21:2. Ancient Elam is located in the modern-day country of Iran. the modern Iranian Aryan inhabitants of the land of Elam are not the historical inhabitants spoken of in Scripture. Herodotus described the inhabitants of the land as Asiatic Ethiopians. Historian J.A. Rogers notes in the book Sex and Race, Volume 1, Negroid scripts of Easter Island in the South Seas have been shown to be similar to those in southern India and Elam, where flourished more than 3,000 years ago a great Negro civilization. American historian John G. Jackson documents in the book Man, God, and Civilization, the Elamites of Mesopotamia, according to Sir Harry Johnston, appear to have been a Negroid people with kinky hair and have transmitted this racial type to the Jews and Syrians. There is a curliness of the hair together with a Negro eye and full lips in the portraiture of Assyria, which conveys an evident Negro elements in Babylonia. Persian king Ahasuerus, better known as King Xerxes I, presided over the empire of the Medes and the Persians at its height. The ancient city of Shusha was the capital of the kingdom of Elam until it was conquered by Cyrus shortly before he conquered Babylon. Today, about 2.73 million Elamites live in Elam, near its borders, where they are a minority group in Iran, but the indigenous population. It is believed that the majority of the defeated Elamites migrated into what is now called India, in the southern states characterized by Dravidian varieties. But they have not heard the last of the Aryans.
There is a history behind this. The first Aryan invasions happened somewhere between 8,500 to 9,000 years ago. That is when people started coming from across Himalayas to Indian subcontinent. So when they came and saw this place, it was the place, and above all, gold. Gold was like everything. Gold was like simply everywhere. You will see not that long ago, even in recent times, something like 1,500 years ago, travelers who came from outside report gold and diamonds were sold, gold nuggets and diamonds were sold on the street side without any security, without anything, which could not be done anywhere else in the world, because it was so abundant. That is what fired all the European expeditions, all the Columbuses, Vasco da Gamas took off because they heard about the gold and they tasted the spice. Because they had established cities. How this happened is just this. These are Aryans who came from outside. They live in harsh lands, so they're nomadic in nature. Because these people here in the indigenous people of India looked at the earth, because of that, thousands of years ago they developed agriculture. They did not know how to travel the seas, but they knew how to get gold out of the land, how to get food out of the land, how to make the land rich and live there. So naturally, they lived in one place. Once they lived in one place, arts, culture, music, mathematics, all kinds of things developed, building crafts, all these things developed and they built cities. When these people did not know what is a city, what is a dwelling, when they lived in tents or slept in open and they were nomadic, when they came and saw this, and because they were always on the move, they were rough men. Because these people had settled down, they kind of softened up. So when they came, they were an easy take. And gradually, as the Aryan hordes came from the north, initially just as like bandits, later on as settlers, later on as conquerors, gradually step by step, in the next 2,000 to 3,000 years, this happened. When this happened, gradually they pushed these people down, pushed these people down. they pushed them south and pushed them south. You will see this, if you just look at the people, you will see the color of the skin, the physical stature, how it changes. Because this is how people were, the two cultures met, intermingled, and this became one way. The really up north looked different, and even today it looks different.
We also find factions of the 10 tribes that journeyed into southern India.
According to the Jewish Virtual Library, the first Jews to settle in India were the black Jews of Cochin in southern India, around 1000 BC during the time of King Solomon.
In 483 BC, the book of Esther opens. Now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus. This is Ahasuerus which reigned from India even unto Ethiopia, over 127 provinces.
In the 12th century, the famous Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela wrote that there was a Hebrew tribe here which considered itself to be one of the lost tribes that were exiled by the Assyrians.
The Cochin Jews are the oldest group of Jews in India, with roots that date back to the time of King Solomon. The Cochin Jews settled in the kingdom of Cochin in South India, now a part of the state of Kerala. This region of Kerala was never part of any earlier Indian empires like Maurya's Gupta's, Sultanate, or Mughal. The western Ghats that separate Kerala from the rest of India offered enough protection from marching cavalries of North Indian empires. The Cochin Jews have a written history that dates from about 1000 AD. However, they settled along the Malabar coast much earlier, and there are references to Jewish traders of the Cochin region in the documents of a Cairo synagogue from the 8th and 9th centuries.
We're going to look at the Jews of Asia. All fascinating, very old communities with remarkable histories, and I hope that you will enjoy it. So why don't we start with the first question, why is this even relevant? And I'd like to point you to a passage in the remarkable itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela. In the context of his travels, he has something to say about the Malabar coast of India. That's on the lower west side of India. But nevertheless, this is what he reports. I'll read in Hebrew and then I'll translate. So speaking about that region, he says, in those areas, there are about 100 Jews living there. And everybody who lives there is black. Shechorim is the word he used. And the Jews too. Yehudim tovim bali mitzvos ubenehem Toras Moshe uneviim, and they're very good Jews, and they perform commandments, and they have the Torah of Moses and the prophets, v'davar muat mitalmud v'halacha, and they also have something of the Talmud and of the halachas. And he says, and you know what? The Jews are black there too. And the next thing he says is, like he says about every single community that he visits, what's the quality of their Torah study? How observant are they? And he just puts them in the same kind of categories as everyone else.
In Mumbai, formerly called Bombay, in western India, we find a community that is set apart from mainstream society.
Bombay is home to 8 million Hindus and 1 million Muslims. Here we found a community numbering about 5,000 that by all accounts should have assimilated into the dominant culture long ago. And though they do not call themselves by any particular tribal name, significantly, like the lost tribes and unlike other Jews, they call themselves the children of Israel, not Judah.
I am not Yehudi, I am Bene Israel. Yehudis, those Jews who migrated to India from Baghdad. My family is Bene Israel.
Our tradition is that 2,700 years ago, my people conquered Israel and took the tribes there to the areas we ruled: Iran, Turkey, Armenia, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan. The Israelites were taken to all of these places. They acted as our servants. They acted as tutors for the Assyrian children. They were also used in the army to help Assyria in warfare.
Along the Silk Road in Uzbekistan, Asia, can be found a community of 1,500 people in a city called Samarkand. In the Sogdian language, this is a compound word. The word can translate to city or fortress. The compound translation is said to translate as the city of the Sumerians. Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel. Archaeological evidence from the National Archaeological Center in Tashkent, Uzbekistan shows 2,200-year-old pottery with the Aramaic script. Today, within this city, can be found the Samaria Hotel and Spa. These are said to be the children of Naphtali and Issachar.
When I was young and had no beard, my grandfather's uncle died at the age of 115. We called him Baba, or grandfather. He used to say that we are the children of Israel. I was young, and at that age people forget things. They don't care much about history or talk of this kind. But now I would like to know, what are our origins? Where do we come from?
Our grandfathers always told us that we are from the Bani Israel, the children of Israel. They said the Jews are as Pathan as we are.
If we go back down the Silk Road, records in Kaifeng, China showed a former large Israelite presence. They were labeled Jews or Yuda by the Chinese. Several Kaifeng Torah scrolls survive housed in collections in the British Library and elsewhere. A number of surviving written works are housed at Hebrew Union's College's Cloud Library in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today, that community has greatly diminished due to assimilation.
Nonetheless, to this day there are Chinese people in Kaifeng whose identity papers still describe them as Jews, Yuda.
So Yudai, this is his name, right?
Yes. I think it shows us that we have been cursed. The reason why we have been thrown out from the land of our ancestors. But according to our forefathers, once you make this meat and the pork in here, that means you have made this thing unclean. If people ask us how long you have been eating this thing, this has been a curse from generation to generation, so we are still using this. So we are waiting for Shilova to come and deliver us from all these things.
If we were born in China, then how come we are not following the religion of the Chinese people? The Chinese people religion is broadly two. One is Confucian and another one is Buddhist. In the two religions, there is no animal sacrifice. But when I was a small boy, we kill some animal. Then we put big plate. The blood of the animal was set there. Then the priest took some bushes, branches, and dip it, and just painted the doorpost.
This shawl is known as Tolopuan. So this tolopuan is a long traditional clothes worn by our forefather when they make a vow.
So there's always a blue thread at the corner?
Yes, there's always a blue thread.
On the 14th of Abib, 30 AD, our Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, was crucified after he came to his own, and his own received him not. How the women of Jerusalem lamented. Luke 23 and 28. But Yeshua, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. Luke 21, 20 through 24. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereunto.
My master is here.
For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be a great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles, until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
I pray you'll return unharmed to Damascus. Reynald of Chatillon. I swear. Withdraw.
In the book From Babylon to Timbuktu, which is archived in the libraries of the Smithsonian Institute, which Barnes & Noble's called a significant addition to this vital fold of knowledge, Dr. Rudolph R. Windsor documents the escape of the prophesied siege. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son, Titus, put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. The slave markets were full of black Jewish slaves. Publius Cornelius Tacitus was an Italian-born senator and historian of the Roman Empire. Later in the year 70, he wrote his Observation of the Jews in the Histories, Book 5, AD 70. As I am to relate the last days of a famous city, it seems appropriate to throw some light on its origin. Some say that the Jews were fugitives from the island of Crete who settled on the nearest coast of Africa about the time when Saturn was driven from his throne by the power of Jupiter. Evidence of this is sought in the name. There is a famous mountain in Crete called Ida. The neighboring tribe, the Iudea, came to be called Judea by a barbarous lengthening of the national name. Others assert that in the reign of Isis, the overflowing population of Egypt led to Hierosolamus, and Judas discharged itself into the neighboring countries. Many again say that they were a race of Ethiopian origin who in the time of King Cephas were driven by fear and hatred of their neighbors to seek a new dwelling place. Others describe them as an Assyrian horde who, not having sufficient territory, took possession of part of Egypt and founded cities of their own in what is called the Hebrew country, lying on the borders of Syria. In his book, Finding Gad, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shamir writes of the God's migration to West Africa. Again, this means that during the 1st century, prior to the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, it was generally known where the 10 tribes taken into Assyrian captivity were. So it is reasonable to believe that the Gadites in Jerusalem and surrounding areas knew where their Gadite brothers were in Africa and stayed in contact with them and decided to join their brothers after the temple was destroyed. It is stated on pages 74 and 75 of Professor Arthur O. Alizzi's book, Igbo Exodus, that this second wave of Gadites and possibly other Hebrews and Jews first passed through Egypt, Libya, and Sudan, and eventually camped at the Chad Basin in northeastern Nigeria. From there, some settled around Zaria, Benue, Ngala, Edoma, Eburu, and the Delta regions. Some went as far as Cameroon to settle, but what is consistent in every account is that many made it to Aguilera, where the first wave settled, and fanned out from there. In the book, Bantu Hebrew Israelites, Identity Revealed, Kenyan author Thomas T. Gakuru reflects, since the time the Jews were routed out of their land, it's more than 1,800 years. It's enough time for people to change completely, forget their language, culture, and even their identity. This is more so if there's a plot to hide history. In the 1861 book, History of Slavery and the Slave Trade, Ancient and Modern, Volume 1, Primary Source Edition by William O. Blake, Blake writes, Negroland or Degretia is that part of the interior of Africa, stretching from the Great Desert on the north to the unascertained commencement of Caffrey Land, and from the Atlantic on the west to Abyssinia on the east. In fact, the entire interior of this great continent may be called the land of the Negroes. The ancients distinguished it from the comparatively civilized countries lying across the coast of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea by calling the latter Libya and the former Ethiopia. Mr. Blake continues, Thus, this race of human beings has been singled out, whether to owing to the accident of color or to their peculiar fitness for certain kinds of labor, for infamy or misfortune, and the abolition of the practice of promiscuous slavery in the modern world was purchased by the introduction of a slavery confined entirely to Negroes. Note, every proposed origin of the Jews by Tacitus placed the Jews as deriving from dark races of people. 1441 marked the true beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, when Prince Henry the Navigator transported 12 blacks back to Portugal from the coast of Africa. In December 1442, Pope Eugenius IV issued papal bull Illis Que Se Pro Divini. In effect, the Pope gave formal authorization for commercial slavery, legitimizing the trading of black people. From the 17th century writings of Francois Perrault comes the book The Voyage of Francois Perrault of Laval to East Indies, the Maldives, the Moluccas, and Brazil. Perrault writes, "It is at 8 degrees from the line toward the south on the coast of Africa, between Guinea and the Cape of Good Hope. It is the poorest country in the world, and living is exceeding dear there, for it produces only some fruits. What costs 10 sols in France will cost 40 in Brazil, and 100 there. No other traffic is carried on but in Negro slaves. The Portuguese hold it solely for this, and would not otherwise inhabit it, for the land produces only some fruits and cattle, and but small store of these. Moreover, in Spain they but seldom put their malefactors to death, as we do in France. They send them all to these desert countries to traffic there." In his 1670 book, Africa being an accurate description of the regions, cosmographer of King Charles II, John Ogilvy, wrote, "We shall treat of the blacks when we come to Guinea, Negro land and the Cape of Good Hope, where they inhabit. Leo says there are other kingdoms on the south frontiers of this country inhabited by a rich, industrious, and just sort of people. Judaism was the religion of the ancient Africans for a long time, and succeeded by Christianity. But Mohammedanism prevailed in the 208th year of Hijrah, when all the Jews, Christians, and professors of the African religion that could be found were put to death." In his 1671 book, America being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, John Ogilvy writes, "The Portuguese that dwelt on this island informed the Netherlands that few lived above 50 years there, yet notwithstanding the great game tempted them to tarry, several of them having 200 or 300 Negroes that worked in the sugar mills. That John III, King of Portugal, sent a colony thither above 200 years before, whom the unwholesome air destroyed, yet the place was not left desolate, for he sent new inhabitants, who first settled in Guinea, next in Angola, and lastly on the island of St. Thomas, that so they might be the better used to the air. That the said king sold all those Jews for slaves that refused to embrace the Roman religion, and caused their children to be baptized, for whom, coming thither in great numbers, most of the present inhabitants were descended." In the 1887 book, The Jews and Moors in Spain, Rabbi Joseph Krauskopf adds, "All Jewish children below 14 years of age were torn from their parents' arms, dragged into the church, baptized. Those under 3 years of age were given to Christians to receive a Christian education, or in other words, to be raised as slaves. Those between 3 and 10 years of age were put on board of a ship and conveyed to the newly discovered unwholesome island of St. Thomas, called Ilhas Porridas, the Isles of Perdition." Rabbi Krauskopf continues, When the news reached the homeless exiles of the atrocious crimes inflicted upon their brethren on their way to the African coast by human captains and heartless crews, seeing nothing but cruel before them, whether going to or whether remaining, they preferred meeting death in Portugal to exposing themselves to the inhumanity and beastly lust and tortures of barbarous pirate sailors and African savages, and listlessly awaiting death and praying for it. They remained after the time purchased for their stay had passed away. To their misfortune, the plague broke out in Portugal, and raged with deathly fury. Immediately the church arose, held the Jews responsible for the visitation of the plague. Author Dagmar Schaefer documents in the book Portuguese Exploration to the West and the Formation of Brazil. In 1493, those who could not pay had their children taken away from them, baptized by force, and deported to Sao Tome in order to be raised as Christians and to help populate the island that the king had just leased to Alvaro de Camino at an annual rent of 100,000 reais. In the book Jews of Spain and Portugal and the Inquisition by Frederick David Mercado, he writes, "This circumstance induced King John to hasten their departure from Portugal, for which purpose ships were duly provided according to the agreement, but such was the temper of the captains and sailors that they subjected the Jews to the hardest possible conditions. They plundered them in their goods and valuables, even to their very clothes, and landed them naked and bare of everything in barren points of the African coast, leaving them to die of starvation or to be sold into slavery to the Moors. Nor was this all. The king wrested from their parents all children between the ages of 3 and 10 of those Jewish immigrants who from poverty or otherwise had omitted to pay the capitation tax on entering, or who were forced to remain in Portugal, and had them transported to the newly discovered island of St. Thomas, which then swarmed with alligators." In his book, The Travels of Ludovico de Varthema documented, "At the end of 8 days we found a mountain, Kaber, which appeared to be 10 or 12 miles in circumference, in which mountain there dwell 4,000 or 5,000 Jews who go naked, and are in height 5 or 6 spans, and have a feminine voice, and are more black than any other color. They live entirely upon the flesh of sheep, and eat nothing else. They are circumcised, and confess that they are Jews." In the 1861 book, The Lost Tribes and the Saxons of the East and of the West, author George Moore writes, "There are multitudes of Jews in every variety of condition in the north of Africa, but there are probably more of the Hebrew race far within the interior, about Timbuktu, in the Lake Tsad, and still further to the south. To the latter, we should look for traces of their connection with the lost tribes. It is well known that the Ga and other Negro tribes have numerous well-marked Jewish characters in their religious observances." In his 1930 book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, author Joseph J. Williams quotes the consul for the British government when he writes, later while criticizing a map that had been published by T. Edward Bowidge in 1819, he says, "Beginning at the top of the map, I find a place called Yehudi, a country or town of non-existence. Yehudi simply implies Jews, the tribe of Jews." Williams continues, "They also apply the term Yehudi to the Hebrew or Jewish tribes, whether native Africans or not, who inhabit Meroe, some parts of Fulani, and the neighborhood of Timbuktu." On page 187, he says, "Yehudi, a place of great trade. This place is reported to be inhabited by one of the lost tribes of Israel, possibly an immigration from the tribe of Judah." Yehuda in African Arabic signifies Judah. Yehudi signifies Jew. It is not impossible that many of the lost tribes of Israel may be found dispersed in the interior regions of Africa. Now we've talked about the Ewe descendants of Aber in Ghana. Now let's discuss the Igbo descendants of Aber in Nigeria, both a dialectical derivation of what we know as Hebrew. In the book, Black Jews in Africa and the Americas, Tudor Parfit observes, there are both oral and written explanations that trace the origin of the Igbo, and the most tantalizing is an association of the Igbo to the Hebrew race. This assumption is based on the fact that Igbo culture has many similar traditions, customs like that of the Jews. Mr. Parfit continues, the Igbo are therefore said to be the split and lost group or tribe of Israel that refused to wander further northeast with Moses, but preferred going down southwards. But on the other hand, the Jews might as well be the descendants of the Igbo. Anglican missionary George Thomas Basden, born in 1873, wrote in his 1921 book, Among the Igbos of Nigeria, the Igbo country lies within the recognized Negro belt, and the people there bear the main characteristics of that stock. Bridgeless noses and wide open nostrils are striking features. Likewise, the thick protruding lips and powerful jaws. The shape of the skull repeats itself with astounding regularity. This peculiarity perhaps being accounted for by the process of molding the shape of the head during infancy. There are certain customs which rather point to Levite influence at a more or less remote period. This is suggested in the underlying ideas concerning sacrifice and in the practice of circumcision. The language also bears several interesting parallels with the Hebrew idiom. In the book, Igbos, Hebrew Exiles from Israel, author O. Alizi writes, the first British explorers who met with the Igbos of Nigeria were quick to identify them as a branch of Hebrews, and so simply refer to them as Hebrews, Hebos, Igbos, and later Igbos. But during the time of the first documentation of the history of the Igbos, the early Igbos, who knew very little or no English following the destination of the new version of their original name by their colonial masters, deviated from the name Ivit, as in Ivit Aguilera, from Ivrit, Ifit, or Ihi, and began to use the popular new and foreign language of the colonialists, and so also refer to themselves as Hebo, a corruption of Hebrew, or accepted to be called Hebo, Igbos, or Igbo, as a way of associating themselves with the emergence of a new culture of the colonial master.
You know what you are? You are an ancient Israelite.
Ancient Israel, that's who we are. That's who we are. So if you give me time, if you give me time, all that he said,
I know. We don't have
so many years.
I know. Look at this. This is pages and pages of notes. And I promise we'll give more teaching. But here is my challenge to you.
All right.
I'm hearing some of your traditions. It's like the days of the Bible.
Yes.
Do you want to remain ancient Israelites or you want to be Jews? That is the question I have for you.
Thank you. I'll answer that question.
Go ahead, I will help you.
After the demise of Solomon, we now have the northern and southern kingdom of Israel.
Yes.
So when we talk about Jews, Jews are Israelites, but all Israelites are not Jews. The 10 tribes that got lost are not Jews. They were Israelites.
Well, it's depending.
So minority cannot swallow the majority. We are here. We are the majority down here. So you are minority, and we are older than you.
All right, Marabi.
You know, in a way, you're doing things in the ancient customs of our people.
Because we're Asian people.
Yeah.
We're Asian people.
Yes.
That's a fact to show you that we're more ancient than even the 1948 establishment of the State of Israel.
Yeah, I understand that.
There are other African tribes that also boast Israelite ancestry, such as the Yoruba, the Hausa, and the Shanti. Ashan was a tribe in Judah. The word T means race of people. What people? The Ashan people of Judah, the race of Ashan. We find the same with the Akan tribe. Akan was a tribe in Judah. Akan is named for Israelite. The trans-Saharan slave trade commenced late in the 7th century when peoples were removed from Africa and taken across the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf or Arabian Peninsula, selling them into the hands of Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, India, and as far away as China. The transatlantic slave trade moved people across the Atlantic Ocean and scattered them throughout the Americas and Europe.
Israel, this is it. Deuteronomy 28 verse 68. And the Most High shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I speak unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. Egypt, yeah man, this is talking about the spiritual Egypt, America, the house of bondage.
Oh, that's how our Western journey began.
Yeah, man.
What we should realize is the Portuguese were taking Africans as slaves from West Africa long before they came to Ghana in 1471. The first time was in 1441. Everything changed when the Spaniards got to what they call the New World.
My name is Miss Hannah Diana Levy, third. I am the great-granddaughter of first Hannah Glaze and the second granddaughter of first Hannah Watson. My mother is Leonie Levy. She married the son of Uriah Augustus Levy, James Roy Levy, and my great-grandfather is John Watson, John Alberta Watson from Scotland, Dundee. They came to live in Jamaica. They were producers who produce crops and send it back to Scotland and Israel. I live in Mount Peace, Lucy, Hanover. And my brother is Joshua Michael Levy, Percival Levy. We are from the tribe of Levites. My ancestors, Edward Glaze, my great-grandfather, he was from Palestine, Israel, the Gaza Strip.
Those captured were marched in chains and shackles from wherever they got them from in West Africa. Those captured from the northeastern part of Ghana would make a stop about 33 miles west from where the slave ships were docked, called as Sin Manso. There they shaved their heads and underarms. They took their first bath after their capture, which also was their last bath on the continent, in the Donko Insur, meaning slave river. They were smeared with shea butter or palm oil, so those who were older would look younger for high purchase prices. They were brought to where they called the palaver to be examined by doctors to determine their strength, after which they were exchanged for guns, gunpowder, and tobacco, obviously according to their strength. They were then shipped to North America, South America, and the Caribbean to work. Few were sent to Europe, actually.
And they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Well, what name? Yah. If we check the transatlantic slave trade database, it is incredible how many times the name Yah appears as a suffix or prefix to a name, from people coming from Hebo or Igbo.
31% of the African American population is believed to be of Igbo ancestry.
because Igbo land suffered more from the slave trade than any other part of Africa.
The book, Creole New Orleans Raised in Americanization, documents between June 1719 and January 1731, 16 slave trading ships arrived in Louisiana from the Senegal region. 6 ships came from Judah, Wida, a slave trading post on the Gulf of Benin near Dahomey, and 1 from Cabinda, Angola, during the same period. It goes on to read, the African slaves brought to the Chesapeake during the 18th century came mainly from the Bight of Biafra and were heavily Igbo. Wida, Fida, Huda, Uda, Judah, or Ajuda is an ancient city frequented since the 16th century by the Portuguese slave traders who gave it its name. Its inhabitants were said to be Judaic and were viewed as a remnant of the scattered tribes of Israel. Author Elise Recluse writes, east of Great Popo begins the Dahomey, guarded by the important town of Glehuse, known to the Europeans by the various names of Fida, Hevuda, Wida, Wida. The old writers called it Judah, and its inhabitants were said to be the Jews. Wida, already an important slave port, it was for the most of the 18th century the most important single port for the export slave trade. The major European slave trading companies had forts there. Jeremiah 17:4, and thou, even thyself, shalt discontinue from thy heritage that I gave thee, and I will cause thee to serve thine enemies in the land which thou knowest not, for you have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. Deuteronomy 28:49, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. Baruch 2:30, for I knew that they would not hear me, because it is a stiff-necked people, but in the land of their captivities they shall remember themselves. Israel was to be like the sand of the sea for multitude, and they were sown into the earth. This is what it looks like to be scattered to the four corners of the world. Israel is like Joseph's coat. 2 Chronicles 7:14, if my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Isaiah 51:11, therefore the redeemed of the Lord shall return and come with singing unto Zion, and everlasting joy shall be upon their head. They shall obtain gladness and joy, and sorrow and mourning shall flee away.
I actually heard stories from some Igbo men that when they were on the slave ships brought to America, I wouldn't use the word disgusted, but they weren't comfortable being next to other males that weren't circumcised.
They